Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, I'm saying that I got this title, Dominican Tradition and Justice and Peace. And Brother Frederick had indicated in the concept notes about religious vocation and justice ministry and quote, the need for rediscovery and engagement. So he noted that the promotion of justice and peace is at the heart of Dominican life, of Christian life. Hence, they need to rediscover, they need to re-examine, and they need to revitalize the role of Christians in this particular case, Dominicans in justice ministry, and to reawaken the consciousness of our role in the Nigerian society, which is very pertinent at this time, given the social, political atmosphere, I don't say economic, the election campaigns coming up. And so what is it expected? What are we expecting from this? Is to reintegrate our concerns for justice and peace in our various engagements. So let me start by laying some background here. And it is the question that is often asked, the question of church and society. Where can the line be drawn? Well, first of all, the Christian mission is to be a prophetic presence in the society. One. Secondly, we are to be a counterculture in society. In other words, we don't follow society, but we set trends, we model, we guide society. That's number one. Secondly, we have to understand that members of the church are also the same members of the society, namely Nigerians, Christians, Catholic. There's one person who is a Christian and the same person who is a politician or a trader or a teacher or whatever. So you cannot separate the two. So given that, we have to also understand that there is an intricate relationship between what happens in the society and what happens in the church, because one influences the other and vice versa. Very often we hear people in a Catholic church especially talking about, oh, politics is dirty, don't go near. Yeah, they're just talking politics, even within the ranks and file of clergy and religious. So I want to make this statement as a background, namely, yes, separation of church and state has its limits, as long as believers are also members of the society. In other words, you cannot say politics is there and I'm here. No, because politics affects you and you should affect politics. Policies in the society should be influenced by us as Christians. So why the emphasis on justice and peace, number one, and secondly, why a Dominican presence at the United Nations? These two questions are often asked. So let me summarize, then I will elaborate. Summary number one, God demands justice from all of us. I emphasize the word demands. Secondly, the church has repeatedly urged us to see justice and peace as an integral part of our daily engagements. And these are documented in the encyclicals from Rerum Novarum of Leo XIII to the most recent one, Fratelli Tutti of Pope Francis. The third is that for those of us who are Dominicans, There is a long-standing tradition that goes back from St. Dominic over 800 years ago, through Catherine of Siena, to our brothers in the Salamanca school, to modern actors. So let me pick up number one. God demands justice from all. I will here cite just a few texts. You shall not undermine the justice due to the sojourner, to the fatherless, or to the widows, or take the widow's garment in pledge. So God looks out for the vulnerable. So must we. The prophet Hosea reminds us of God's preference for justice. For, quote, God desires steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. So knowledge of God demands justice, which translates into love and care for people. And our brother Thomas Aquinas defines love as the seeking the good of the other. So intentionally going out of your way to seek the good of the other, that is love. As described in the scripture, God so loved the world that while we were sinners, God sent his only son to die and save us. So Jesus became human for our sake, not for his sake, out of love, even when we were sinners. Again, I continue, injustice offends God. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous are both alike. In what way? They are an abomination to the Lord. Again, let justice roll down like a river and righteousness as a mighty stream. So to do righteousness and justice is more desirable to God than sacrifice. I desire justice. It is this that Jesus quoted in Matthew 9:13. I desire righteousness, not sacrifice. And in fact, that God says at one point that for you to stand and pray before God, come to the temple to pray, go and do justice first, because as the prophet Jeremiah puts it, when the unjust stands in the temple to pray, quote, God says, I close my ears when you pray. When you raise your hand, I close my eyes. Can you imagine God closing his ears, covering his ears, and closing his eyes to the prayers of the unjust? That is serious. Again, God abhors indifference. As Amos puts it, woe to the complacent in Zion. Quite a strong statement. And the rich man and Lazarus story, the rich man was condemned not because he was rich, because he was indifferent to Lazarus. Sorry, some of this has shifted. But we see too, Jesus himself in the famous text that we all know, from Luke chapter 4, verses 18 to 19, or 21, as you might want to extend. Jesus proclaimed that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and God had anointed him to do what? Proclaim good news to the poor, bring freedom to prisoners, freedom to prisoners of fear, prisoners of ignorance, prisoners of colonized minds, and we can go on and on about forms of prison. To bring recovery of sight for the blind. There is the physical blindness, but a far worse blindness is spiritual blindness. People who close their eyes to the sufferings of others. That is far worse. And Jesus said, I'm here to set the oppressed free. So we see that even from the early beginnings of Jesus' ministry, the gospel shows clearly that Jesus was much focused on justice, justice to God, and justice to neighbor. As I put here, we read also Matthew 25 about the last judgment. I was hungry, you fed me, in prison, oppressed, and whatever you did not do for me, or for the least of these ones, you did not do for me. So the condemnation, I repeat again, of the rich man was not because he was rich, but because of indifference. He was indifferent to the sufferings of Lazarus. So as Christians, as religious, as Catholics, we cannot be indifferent to what is around us. God calls us to engage in it with, indifference offends God. That is why over many years, Catholic social teachings continuously remind us of the need to get engaged, the need to be part and parcel of what is going on, the need to rise up and defend the dignity of the human person, regardless of gender, nationality, education, wealth, religion, position in society, because human dignity is endowed by God through the creative act, not what we do, not the ranking of society, not the social stratification that we have created, not the place where we live, the fancy house or riches, but precisely because we are human. So evangelization and justice has been part and parcel of Catholic social doctrine from Rerum Novarum, I've said it before, Caritas in Veritate, Benedict XVI, Fratelli Tutti of Pope Francis. All of these Catholic social teachings, 15 of them, emphasize justice to God and neighbor as an integral part of our lives and our ministry. We cannot, may not, and should not think that we can separate the two. No. It's like trying to say, okay, here is me, this is my Catholic self, this is my social self, this is my religious self, this is my political self. No, one person, one integral person. And the church reminds us, actually quoting from God, that charity even should presuppose justice. In other words, it is more important to be just to people before we can even talk about being charitable towards them. Let me quote something from Pope Benedict XVI in Caritas in Veritate. It is a little loaded statement, but listen carefully. Pope Benedict says, I cannot give what is mine to the other without first giving to the other what pertains to him in justice. If we love others with charity, then first of all, we are to be just towards them. That is very well said. In other words, don't try and give people gifts when there is an underlying injustice there. It doesn't mean anything. And later on, Pope Benedict, coming to the same emphasis in a document, Africae Munus, number 18. Actually, that document should be available to us because it is the post-synodal exhortation of the Second Synod of African Bishops. And so Benedict XVI was on African soil, in Lomé, to be precise. And he called out the multinational corporations who are exploiting Africa, and said that these multinational corporations and the Western communities, the Western countries, must first of all be just towards Africa, because what Africa needs is not charity, but justice first, in the sense that they will take out billions of dollars out of the continent and come back and give us tokens of 1 million here and declare, hey, we've gotten foreign assistance, when they have ripped you off of your life savings. So the Pope describes as false a charity which fails to respect justice and the rights of all. I'm quoting, a charity that is not accompanied by works of justice is false. So that's a very strong emphasis. And why are we engaged in all of this? Is because of human solidarity, the dignity of the human person and human solidarity. And we must understand the connectedness between one person and one another, between nations, between individuals. We are all interconnected in what Pope Paul VI in Populorum Progressio describes as a supernatural brotherhood, that we are so interconnected that when one person is diminished, all of us are diminished. And conversely, when one person is exalted, is elevated, we all are. So in charity to ourselves, in goodness to ourselves, we should work to raise up the dignity of our sisters and brothers. So working for justice, pulling people out of dungeon has a benevolent implication for us, you know. So, and the same applies to caring for creation in Laudato Si. And so here it is, namely all Catholic social teachings, all of them, they are grounded in the scriptures. They are grounded in the scriptures. And we are obligated by God to be just towards our brothers and sisters, and to be just towards the earth, the creation that God entrusted to our care. The Lord God took Adam and put him in the garden, the middle of the garden, to till it and govern it. Sometimes when we read, oh, fill the earth and conquer it, the word conquer is not properly translated, is govern it. A governor is one in Nigeria. When those who govern look for themselves, that's not governance, that's ruling and suppressing people. A true governor seeks the common good, takes care of what is entrusted to him or her, and ensure that there is a level playing ground for everybody to actualize himself or herself. So let me go back to why are we involved in the UN? So I will stop the screen sharing now, and then I will stop the screen sharing and try to answer that question again. Coming back to why are we engaged at the UN? What is it? Well, first of all, the United Nations serves as a symbol of justice, of peace, and the common good for all of us, for the international community. While it may not always achieve its objective, it is a necessary institution. In that context, it is imperative that we as a church community be present and try to the best we can to provide guidance for achieving justice and peace that is grounded in the scriptures. So working for justice is a mandate from God. And the scripture is filled with numerous instances, as I've cited before. So then specifically, why is it that the church puts delegates at the UN? You know that right now we have delegates. Actually, the apostolic nuncio to the UN in Geneva is our brother, Archbishop Fortunatus. And so, first of all, by being there, we are responding to God's command. I'm repeating what I said at the beginning. Secondly, we are responding to the urgings of the church. And as Dominicans, thirdly, we are following the footsteps of St. Dominic, the witnesses of many Dominican men and women before us. So I'll start with St. Catherine of Siena, for example. St. Catherine of Siena is well known as a mystic, even outside the Catholic circles. She is credited with playing an important role for the restoration of the papacy from Avignon to Rome. And she's credited with many noble things. But what is not often said about Catherine of Siena is that she was a formidable justice advocate. She could not understand how, in the face of injustice, people would go about their work as if all was fine. She openly confronted civil and religious leaders for their complacency. And in fact, she actually, some called people names, including high-ranking officials in the church and in society, for being complacent. And St. Catherine said this: if we cannot do something personally about an unjust situation, we should at least, I'm quoting her, cry out as with 1,000,000 voices, because it is silence that kills the world. So, as to the United Nations, Dominicans have a special contributions to the founding of the United Nations. What is it? It began with the Dominicans in Spain, in Salamanca, in the 15th century, when they learned about the human rights violations and abuses of natives in the Americas, as they call it, the New World then, especially in Latin America of today. So our brothers came to the defense of the natives, arguing that the Spaniards, by violating the rights of the indigenous peoples in the Americas, in the New World, were breaking the laws of Spain that prevents such atrocities. So the Spanish colonizers had a counter argument. They argued that the crime our brothers pointed out was not committed within the territories of Spain, and therefore the law of Spain could not apply to them. So listen to these arguments carefully. But the Dominicans in Salamanca, led by Francesco de Vitoria, argued that the law was made for and binding on the citizens of Spain, and therefore wherever the Spaniards were, wherever the citizens of Spain were, the law was binding on them. That gained traction. So that analysis laid the foundation for what later emerged as international law. That is, laws that are not limited to, say, Nigeria alone, but spread to Cameroon, to Africa, and beyond. That was argument number one. Number two is that the same brothers argued that, or proposed that, given the atrocities, there should be a need for nations with like minds and common values coming together to promote the common good so that all can benefit from it. This argument did two things. One, as I've mentioned, laid the foundation for international law, and secondly, gave the principles for the establishment of what was then known as the League of Nations. And what the League of Nations today is called by another name, the United Nations. So the founders of the United Nations recognized the role that our brother Dominicans played in the foundation, to the extent that the Great Hall at the United Nations office in Geneva is named Salle de Victoria in French, the Victoria Hall, and named after a Dominican friar, Francesco de Victoria, who was the lead person in the arguments that defended the rights and dignity of the indigenous people in the Americas and applied the law of Spain to Spaniards who were living outside of Spain, committing atrocities. So the Dominicans contributed to the foundation of the United Nations, and it is appropriate that we should be there. We need to be there. We need to provide guidance to the extent we can, guidance to what we started. And so right now, the Dominicans are present in the 4 United Nations office, starting with New York, which is focused on state security. Geneva is focused on human rights, and it is actually a place where we can make the most effective influence because that covers a lot. This is where we can really have an edge in terms of contribution by being active on the ground, participating in Universal Periodic Review, which reviews a set of countries every 4 years, documenting cases of human rights violations that actually happen, analyzing ways local and international laws are violated, and engaging in advocacy for the affected persons and community. So the UN at Geneva is where the real action is in this case in terms of human rights. We have Vienna, which is an output there that focuses on crime prevention and criminal justice, drugs, human trafficking, juvenile detention, etc. And then the office in Nairobi focuses on climate change and the environment. So in all of this, it is important that brothers and sisters on the ground engage in activities, because without concrete facts on the ground, the delegation is really not effective. You can't just go there and talk theory. If we want to say, okay, there is violence in Nigeria, unknown gunmen, whoever they are, killing X, Y, Z, kidnapping this many priests. And so that's what I talk about, factual documentation, which hopefully in the following webinar or in-person discussion, we can get to that. So our engagement at the UN is not theoretical. It is grounded in the sufferings of people. Let me cite one case before I stop, one case that is near to us. In Ivory Coast, for example, the government in Ivory Coast for a long time had been detaining young people, very young people who shouldn't be in prison, you know, and they were detained, locked up with no access of family. So this came to us, and we worked with the Dominican family there, including co-opting a late Dominican lawyer she's been great, documenting the case to the extent that we brought it to Vienna and then got back. So through that advocacy, we forced the government to allow at least access to those young people. And last year, for the first time, the government was able to open up the prison for visits And a Dominican family there organized a Christmas party for the children, the incarcerated children in Ivory Coast. And not only that, the banning of even taking pictures was not allowed that even the Christmas party was videoed by our brothers. So what it is now is that we, excuse me, somebody disrupting this. So here we are with what is happening is that we need to be fully engaged in what is happening. We need to open our eyes to see, and whatever it is, let us remember justice is at the heart of who we are as Christians, who we are as Catholics, who we are as religious. So I'll stop there. I see it's, my allowable time is ended. We shall continue this later. So I try to respect time. So Brother Fred or moderator, that's where I end for today. We shall continue another day.
Thank you very much, Father Okure, for doing justice to this topic. We're talking about justice. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
I lost two people at the beginning of the program, and that's why I didn't come in at the time I was needed to come in. I'm sure Brother Fred did justice to that. Did you?
Yes, I tried.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Okay, thanks for rescuing me. But I'm back on board, and I want to thank very specially the resource person in the person of Father Anyedi Okure. I am also sure you introduced him properly the way you were supposed to. Did you do that?
Yes.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
You did that? Okay, yes. Fine. So the people are good. And we have listened to Father critically. He has basically, the purpose of our meeting, he has done justice to that. It was for us to understand how the discourse about justice and peace fits into our Christian and Dominican vocation. And he has done that. I understand too that not just Dominicans are in this great meeting with us. Some other lay friends of ours have joined. And so it's a call for us, a wake-up call for us Christians and Dominicans to rise up and be awakened to the fact that we are justice and peace promoters. That he went ahead to tell us that God is God of justice, God loves justice, he upholds injustice, and then he also told us that, he warned us against the sin of omission. We have to contemplate as Christians, as Dominicans, and bring the fruits of contemplation into action. We cannot see injustice and keep quiet. He calls us to rise up to the injustices happening in our nation, Nigeria specifically, and speak against it and act against it, and make sure that the structures of injustice are properly confronted and that justice is brought to bear on the citizens, on the people. We can look at it being illustrated at the point of view of an onion that has layers, and that from the beginning of it is God. At the heart of it is God that is there. And so it spreads out to humanity. And so our dealings with humanity in the church, in society, and all that are all encompassing. So we have to reach out to humanity. We have to be there for humanity. We have to be practical at it so that we can actually come out and speak about it. It's only when we are involved that we can speak against these injustices and we can take them to the places where the structures will actually be addressed. Thank you very much, Father Okure. I am sure that participants have comments and questions to ask. If you have comments and questions, please leave them in the chat box or raise up your hands if you want to ask Father to questions to clarify, or if you have comments, or if you have any opinion to share with us on this topic.
Brother Emeka Moses has raised his hand.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Do you want to? You may want to ask your question. Yes,
Yeah,
we've seen you.
well,
Please, Father.
Mine isn't really a question. It's kind of a comment, a contribution.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Father Niedi, for this enlightening topic, and I particularly at the important remark about the need for the involvement, the need for involvement of the church in matters of society, because here in Nigeria that remains a problem. In fact, a couple of days ago in our Catan, that is Catholic Theological Association, it's the same argument I was pushing, that we still suffer from this dualism, in which there is this dualism between what is spiritual and what is material, the church and society. And it doesn't help in when that dualism exists, our participation in matters of justice also is affected, or is affected. But then what I want to highlight here is the fact that, going back, that I think it's not just sufficient that we become what I might call activists against social injustice. It's not just sufficient that we keep with protesting or trying to resolve that. But I think also we need to take more proactive, because a more proactive approach, in the sense that, but to highlight what I want to say, let's go back to the critique of the Latin in Latin America, when the whole liberation theology started. The critique was that it's not just enough to do charity to the poor, but also it's better to correct the structures of injustice. So, and there's a way, part of the way to remove the structures of injustice, to be at the point where those structures are created. You see, that goes back to the point of involvement. Because if, for example, let me use an example, the Nigerian situation, you have the lawmakers. I don't see why the CBN should not have representations, even on the basis of observer status, national, that the laws are made. Because if we are at the point where those structures are created, if we're able to nip them from the onset by being active participants, not just passive recipients, that then begin to raise our voices when the acts of injustice arise. If we are involved at the point where decisions are made, then it can, a lot can be done to avoid, injustice. But then if we are just mere participants, mere passive observers, then that's where we become more like activists. We simply have to raise banners against injustice, whereas we could be active participants, so that we prevent acts of injustice being created. So that's the point. So I'm actually moving from a case of being just passive activists to being active. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, yes. As I said, hopefully we'll have another session and I can engage in talking about how to change systems, because most of the injustice we have today are systemic. And so we need to target unjust structures We need to target, whether it be within the church, outside the church, in politics. Most of the injustices around the world are embedded in the systems that human beings have created. So that's number one. The second thing you raised about our presence at the beginning. You know, as the church is present at the UN, even not just at Dominicans, they appoint an apostolic nuncio to the UN in Geneva. And the present one, as I said, luckily is a Nigerian. So the Bishops' Conference should be able, and other structures, to do the same and try to affect what is happening in Nigeria. When I served as coordinator of ethnic ministries at the Bishops' Conference in the United States, we had a Department of Church and State. And people there were employed, lawyers, ex-politicians, to relate to Congress and see what is happening. So they would bring information while it is being discussed. They will bring that information to the bishops in the US. They will discuss it and start, quote, an offensive before it is even enacted. And I was privileged to be present in some of those sessions. For example, the US under Clinton was trying to send the Haitians away under protective status and to Liberians. So I happened to be invited to that meeting. And the bishops, having learned from the ground, were able to stop Bill Clinton from even enacting the law. So being engaged at the initial stage is very important. Okay, so let me leave room for somebody else.
I think Sister
Oh,
Bennett was raising.
hello.
I think Sister Bennett was raising her hand. Something.
Yes, yes. Well done. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Anedi. I felt intellectually and emotionally fired. Thank you very much. A simple question I want to ask. How can we formally register AFJN in Geneva? How can we do that formally? You are there, yes, but so that formally AFJN will be given a seat and we can send our cases to Geneva. That is my,
okay.
yes.
It's quite a long process in the sense that for somebody to rise to the level that the Dominicans are right now and achieve ECOSOC status, meaning the economic and cultural and social rights status, be given the floor, the point to make statements on the floor, which we do. It requires a lot of loopholes and presence. For example, the Dominicans are present in 120 countries across 5 continents.
Yeah.
So that in itself gives the weight of people being there and having that status, being registered as, and now say like in Switzerland, fulfilling the laws of the Swiss government, since the United Nations is located there, and so to have the accreditation as of a consultative status at the UN. So it's quite a long process. But I was thinking that maybe as a first shot to try the African Union, and see what influence can happen there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. That could be a decision taken by this group, or it should be taken to AFJN forum.
Yeah, I think many fora can discuss that AFJ and
Okay.
trace and in consultation with others within the continent to see how can there be a presence at the at the African Union in Addis Ababa.
Okay.
I see somebody, Brother Chris is having his hands up.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Father Niedi.
Thank you.
My question is this. You have said that most of the injustices is systemic and structural. And you have advised that, if possible, let the Nigerian bishop begin to seek representation, maybe in our governmental arms, organs. How can they go about this? Are we going to be represented in the Senate, the National, House of Representatives National, or we begin from state level? How do we go about this?
Good question, my brother. It can be done at the state level. It can be done at the national level. You are there in the US, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, when actually the Bishops' Conference in Nigeria has a department called the Department of Church and State. I think that's what it's called. Okay. When I worked at the Bishops' Conference in Washington, the department is called the Department of Government Liaison, but whatever name it is,
Okay.
it is not electing people to Congress, but having personnel who are citizens can go and sit and listen to what is going on.
Okay.
I sat in many congressional discussions. I went to congressional breakfast. I listened to things. So I was aware of what is going on.
Okay.
And so you bring that information back to the bishops and said, oh, they're planning to, for example, enact a law that is anti-Catholic, do something. And of course, the Catholic Church in Nigeria, whatever else we may say about it, has a strong, strong presence. Personnel, structures, the coverage of the whole country. So the mechanisms of making that happen, if anybody should have it in Nigeria, it should be the Catholic Church. It is there. So in Abuja, for example, send people to be present at government discussions. People go in there. You register, you get a badge. That's what we did in Washington. You get a permit and go in. That is available in at the National Assembly. You sit there and listen, take notes, come back to the bishops.
Okay.
So that is very possible. And if at the state level, I'm not quite aware, if there is such structure, then the dioceses within the state could do the same. Go to the state assembly, listen to what is going on, and bring the information to the bishops to tackle it before, not after the law is passed, you go running to try and dismantle it when you could have prevented it in the first place. Prevention is better than cure, you know?
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
There are some hands up.
Okay. Okay. Okay, because I wanted to make a comment. It's okay.
I see two hands up.
Next person.
Father Celestine Wakwe.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And thank you, brother, for the good job you are doing and representing the Dominican order and the church at large. It's interesting listening to you and talking about justice, charity, and what is, which I believe is the original intention of the formation of UN. Today, given the situation of the world, beginning with Syria, how the whole world watched Syria just because of one man. And that place was almost completely decimated. What is going on in Nigeria today and all over the world? How much do you think political correctness is affecting the original intention of the UN? And how can the church really, how would the church contribute in terms of upholding justice over political correctness? Thank you.
Thank you. when I mentioned the 4 offices of the UN around the world, New York, Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi, I mentioned that the place that we as church community can have the most impact is the Geneva office. In fact, that's why the order sends the permanent delegate to, to the UN in Geneva. Why am I saying that is that what is happening in Syria, what is happening in Ukraine, what happens in Libya, etc., what happens in Iraq, comes out of New York, state security and politics. Unfortunately, talk of systems, the UN is structured in such a way that there are people, meaning UN in New York, there are people, countries with veto power who wield the sword more than the rest of us, which people are talking about changing those dynamics. US, China, France, Russia, with veto powers. So, like the case in Syria, okay, it is, you know how they say when elephants fight, the grass suffer. The case of Syria or the case in Iraq, or now Russia in Ukraine, or NATO bombing structures out of Libya with other reasons, but telling us, oh, we are trying to establish democracy. I can go into that another day. It had nothing to do with democracy, So how do we contend that? That is where, in some ways, the church's power is limited, unfortunately. For example, the church, more vocal, especially Pope Francis and Cardinal Turkson, really tried to rein in Russia in this case, even reaching out to the Patriarch of Moscow, the Patriarch Kirill, and even Cardinal Johnson saying you are supporting Putin, you are committing fratricide. I'm quoting him, So we can do that, but sometimes because A, it is politics, B, there is some state sovereignty. The church's power is somehow limited when it comes to politics and what comes out of New York. But in terms of human rights and calling, the church has greater authority from the Geneva office, really. So, and I repeat again, that's why the delegate of the Dominicans, the permanent delegate is delegated to the Geneva office because of what can happen. And I could cite instances that the delegation has influenced the course of things, including what is happening in the Dominican Republic, or the release of the political prisoner in Venezuela, or the stopping of Chinese companies mining in the Philippines. So we have greater impact in bringing about change from the Geneva office. When something concerns direct politics or war, somehow our hands are a little tight, like what is happening in Myanmar. We've tried something, calling out stuff, we mitigate it a little, but we don't have the strong impact we could have out of the Geneva office. So I stop there, see another hand is up. Sister Teresa, hand is up.
Am I asked to speak?
Yes, sister.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sister.
Okay. When we were talking about the involvement of the bishops, how we get involved at the state and national level in Nigeria, the Dominicans were talking, they are united, and that is how you can move. I am not so sure that as a church, we have a common will and a common purpose, not just talking, issuing communiques and this, but the kind of commitment that an order like the Dominican order is having. So how do we promote that? Because this is what is destroying this country. Before you talk is, where do you come from? What province do you have? Which one is there? Who is going to be there? And so nothing happens. So, Father, your name is not there. I only see your number, 582 something. You are scratching your head. You raised that question. So I'm putting that question to you. We have a groundwork, a fundamental Christian work. We say we are the body of Christ, church family of God. It ends in the books, the documents produced in the church. I was working with the Kampala, which the bishops, that was second produced in what they said for their golden jubilee.
In Kampala.
Yeah, in Kampala.
If I may.
In 2018 or so, or 2019, before COVID came in. People don't even know that. All the beautiful things they see, you go. So my question is, what is the matter with us? Because a house divided, it just cannot stand. That is the issue. We have to be courageous enough to ask ourselves and to say, what do we do? And then, we're talking about religious congregations. We are supposed, they say we are the heart of the church. We are the one binding it together. God help us. The divided hearts of the, of the congregations is another thing. So my brother, over to you.
Before you go on, Father Chris O'Reilly is the vicar of the provincial of the Dominicans in the US. So it's calling out of.
Okay. Okay, because when I see it, just his face up to here, no name.
Yes, sister, my name is Christopher. Before Father Niedi comes in, I want to say that I think in each diocese we have a JDPC. Yeah. If you can have that at religious groups level, like what we are doing now. Our brother Frederick is in charge of justice and peace for our province. We have a JDPC in each, I think, in each diocese. If from there we can send representation, ask the permission of the bishop to send representation to state senate, state house of assembly. If bishops give, them the permission, then they can have go and get the permission, the badge and everything. When there's a session, they will go there and sit down and listen. And there's something important that is affecting the church, they will bring it to the diocesan bishop.
Yeah, what happens after that?
Well, that's for the bishop. Let Aniedi answer that.
That's when the problem is. Yeah. One piece of broom doesn't sweep. What happens after that?
It may even come back.
No, my brother was saying there is a fundamental problem. We need to begin to ask and speak about it. So before I stop, it's very enlightening to hear what is happening at Geneva, because you hear Geneva and New York and you think that Geneva is, well, how should I say? I don't want to say Jara, but it's but from what you are sharing, it's been very, very enlightening, and yet, so thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
And then to hear of Geneva and Vienna and Nairobi, we're talking about Nairobi, you never even heard of Nairobi, except when they are going in for tourism or whatnot. So what Nairobi is on African soil. What are we doing with that?
Yes.
Nairobi.
Yes, actually, we were asking about presence. That's another way where we can have impact, because it is actually, I would call it divine providence, that the Office for Environment and Climate is on African soil. Because this is the continent that is most impacted by climate, and yet a study that was published at the end of last year by Climate Monitor comes out that the entire continent of Africa only contributes 9% of emission to the atmosphere, 9%. So 91% of the others happens from outside Africa. And yet the impact of gas emission, green gas emission and climate change Africa is feeling it the most, you know. So it's like they pollute the earth and Africa receive the brunt of it. And so that's another place that Africans can contribute something to. But sister, to come back to your question, where you said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So this is something that the church needs to sit back and look at itself. One Holy Catholic and Apostolic. So I leave it there. I think we are getting over time. So I'll leave it there. And, people on the ground will have to work for that.
Thank you so much, Father, and all the participants. I would have just loved to say quickly that charity begins at home. We've been speaking outwardly. I wanted to know how we can actually come inward to see, because if you look at what Brother Fred talked about, he was also trying to look at justice within the family. As we live in Nigeria, you know, so many injustices are going on here, the violence, conflict, war and oppression, poverty, inequality, and then even within the family, that some persons feel at some point unjustly treated, and that's the Dominican family. And then outside the family out there, when we see things happening, because if we want to look outward, we may not, if we don't begin from home, we may not be able to reach out there. We have to know where we're coming from to know where we're going to. So if we don't actually see situations in Nigeria, situations in our communities where we need to do justice, where we need to speak out, where we need to guide against the culture of silence and an injustice that it upholds God and he cannot listen to us when we are found in that situation. How then can we as Dominicans in our communities, and then with the people who work with us in our ministries, how can we be seen to be doing justice before we can go out to talk about reaching out to justice situations in the diaspora, so to say? Can we, because I saw that in one of the things that Brother wrote, he wanted to see justice within the family. And I want to hear a little bit of that before we draw the curtains for the night.
Okay, is it from Brother Fred?
No. Yes, it's part of the concerns he has, but on what you wrote before. Maybe it didn't come up today, but I saw it as one of the concerns he has there. Justice within. Well,
Okay.
we keep quiet when a brother or a sister feels unjustly treated and say, no, we don't, let me not talk about it. Let me just be complacent. It's not, things like that. Are they actually happening? Do we need to look at them from within before we be seen to be doing justice out there?
Okay, so I have two short answers to that. The first is evoking St. Catherine of Siena. When there is injustice, if you cannot do anything, you can do at least one thing. Quote, cry out as with 1 million voices. I'm quoting St. Catherine of Siena because it is silence that kills the world. Okay, that's another thing. The other is that we need to develop what I may call identification. Let me explain what I mean. When I was in the novitiate, which is about maybe 200 years ago, there's this book we read. I don't remember the contents, but at least I remember the title. Okay? And the title of the book is very straight. That man is you. If you can Google it, you'll see the book, Louis Avery. That man is you. Okay, why is that important? Is that when we begin to see in the other person, in one another, ourselves, when we begin to identify, that's what I mean by identification. When I begin to identify that that man is me, that woman is me, then this question of injustice, in fact, the more we are able to do that, the more a new world opens up. And it's a very beautiful world, because that lets us to understand our interconnectedness. That lets us to understand that when I harm you, I am harming myself. When I put you down, and I'm diminishing myself, as Paul the sixth rightly puts it in Populorum Progressio, that when one human person is diminished, we all go down. When one is elevated, we are all elevated. And if you look at the family structure, the biological family structure and community structure, in communities and families where people work to lift up others, there is happiness, there is progress, there is God's life in it. It just is, you know. So to the extent that in communities, in families, we are able to identify that woman is me, that man is me, you see that injustice literally disappears. It doesn't mean we don't offend each other. We offend, we forgive, we hug each other, we kiss and move on. But when we begin to get into this me, myself, and form plagues, and it happens in biological family, then we are on the path of destruction. You know, we open up to evil when there is discord. We open up to evil when we are so self-centered. We open up to, I'm using this word lightly, possession of the evil spirit. When we allow all these things to take us over, in other words, it blinds us even to our unjust actions towards the other. So I think that's something we could have a whole 3 hours and sit down and chase it out. And we can bring up examples, but my basic thing is this, from my personal experience, is that the more I am able to identify with the other, the less likely that I will do harm verbally, by action or otherwise, to that person, because I have come to understand that you are me.
Wow.
Yeah, to understand that you are me. That person is you. Think about it.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you, brothers and sisters. In particularly, Father, we want to thank you for making us understand this evening that justice and peace is indeed an integral part of the Dominican tradition. And we cannot help but do justice. This is just the beginning of the series that will be coming up. Thank you very much. And we pray that God will continue to enlighten you, God will continue to strengthen you.
I thought I can still ask a question.
When we rounding off.
I don't know if you can grant that permission. Brother Fred.
Let me quickly say
Hello.
something.
Actually, I was putting it on the chat box, but it went off.
Okay.
Okay,
so
say
right.
Can I go ahead?
All right, let's allow her to ask her question, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask, what will you succinctly or describe or define as injustice in the light of climate change? And how can each person, remedy this?
Very interesting. Incidentally, Sister Teresa is on this forum since he has disappeared. Because as you are asking, I remember something that Sister Teresa said at a conference on, it was a continental conference on just governance, land grab and just governance in Nairobi, year 2015 to be exact. And she was a keynote speaker of that conference. And she was asked to speak on the climate, the earth, and on the context of Laudato Si, land grabbing and violations of the rights of the earth. And she said this, she was talking about creation. I mean, talk of an eye-opener of a statement. And she said this, talking about how, from the traditional standpoint, the earth is who owns us, not the other way, because we came out of the earth, we are buried in it, and so each time we violate it, it's like we are standing things upside down. But here is a statement she made. She referred to Genesis, the creation in Genesis, and then went, oh, then God said, this is the particular one, let the earth bring forth all kinds of plants, seed-bearing plants, fruit-bearing plants. The leaves will serve as medicine and fruits as, and then she went on, and then she stopped for a good, maybe 10 seconds that appeared to me like 10 hours. And I'm saying, oh my goodness, did she forget what she wanted to say? And then she said this, do you know that in the context of creation, the earth is a living thing? Because God could not have commanded a live thing to bring forth life. So that's the background to your question, that our violations of the earth, destruction of the earth, that is injustice to God, injustice to a living thing, injustice to what God gave us to sustain us life. Actually, I just returned from the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, where I went to examine, talk of injustice to the earth, where Chinese companies and other companies are destroying centuries-old forests, cutting it down as if there is no tomorrow. And what has happened? Erosion, running down to the streams that people eat, violations of the. So in a sense, in one word, the justice is to the earth, to climate change, is when we violate our basic responsibility that God gave us, till the earth and govern it, take care of it. In any context, and especially in African context, when you are entrusted to care for something, the least you are expected is to maintain it. If you destroy it, you are engaging in acts of injustice. So mining, desertification, deforestation, all of that are injustice. And it's injustice to ourselves. As Pope Francis says, we are destroying the earth, our common home. And so I concluded a quotation from Cardinal Turkson about injustice to the earth and climate. Quote, God, I'm quoting Cardinal Turkson here, God gave us the earth as a garden. We, by our activities, have turned it into a desert for the future. What an injustice. What an injustice. Okay, I leave it there. I see Sister Pauline is very eager, shuffling. So that's my answer there. I know it wasn't succinct enough, but I needed to provide the background to saying when we go out of it, that's injustice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's allow Sister to ask a question, and that will be the last, then we'll conclude for this night. Sister Choma.
Sister Pauline.
Both of them. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you so much, Father, for this, your input, and Brother Frederick and Sister. Thanks so much. Mine is, yes, an exhortation that is coming to me, and also to say I'm very happy about this movement that is coming up little by little. I wasn't here at the beginning because I was having another engagement to round up with. One of my questions is this group now, is there a definition about it? Is there a coordination? What name can we give it? As I said, I wasn't at the beginning. I know it's Dominicans for justice, but I want to understand in years past, yes, we've been trying to organize things. I'm happy a sister is here, a brother is here. How is it organized and how is it taken forward henceforth? That is one. I was happy also to see in our own Dominican Sisters Forum, a sister was posting it continuously, which is an encouragement and improvement. I think if we begin now to look at the future vision, it will help us to realize not starting and disappearing, starting and disappearing. Well, that is one thing. On the other hand, when Father was talking about the Catholic social teachings, the intervention of Emeka Nwosu, and then this climate change, I began to think, how can these things be transformed into actions by the Dominicans in Nigeria? Sister said, can we talk of charity begins at home? I have worked a long time with the Justice and Peace, both internal and external as Dominican. I felt a bit satisfied when I was in Jos. Teresa and Benedette, maybe they are no more here. When I was in Jos, I felt a bit satisfied because for the first time, I was facing an action part of justice and peace with the AFGN. It has been my desire that the Dominicans could gather the momentum. It's true, we are order of preachers and we talk and talk and talk, but what can we do together for these little things? Climate change, raising our voice, doing something concrete, even if it is 2 minutes, 3 minutes, is it through Dominican media? Something. I'm just passionate about this action that speaks more than words. I don't know if Father Okure could help me there, but he knows that in Jos, I had to do some demonstration, organize some things with the empowerment that I got from AFGN. Can Dominicans be heard? In the United Nations, there is this picture of our brother who was asking, are they not human beings? Are they not part of us? Don't they have human dignity? He was challenging the status quo. When shall we start? Thank you.
Okay. I thought Brother Fred was going to say something, but let me say this. Yes, it's true that talk without action is empty, you know. And I said during my presentation that even the delegation in Geneva does not engage in theory. You know, it is gathering facts on the ground, it is action, okay? Like, let me tell you, in the last 2 months, I've been on 4 continents. Tenango in Mexico, Philippines, the Solomon Islands, Democratic Republic of Congo, here in Spain, Tanzania, Uganda. And in fact, others are following. Why am I saying that? Is to trigger people to do action on the ground and collect information, because I cannot just go to the UN and start talking blah, blah, blah. No, we need concrete information to act. And that is why this forum is very important. It's important that our brothers and sisters on the ground document what is happening. The documentation doesn't even have to come to Geneva unless it is needed. It doesn't have to go to Nairobi unless it is needed. There are changes that we can make locally, a lot of it. If any country can be talked about as being a context for justice activity, it's Nigeria. Is it killings, kidnapping, embezzlement, disunity, ethnic politics, all kinds of stuff? It is what do you call it? A minefield for justice advocates, so many things. So, Brother Fred, as justice and peace promoter for the province. That comes back to you. And then our sister, who is sister moderator for this occasion. So the two of you need to work to see how to engage and continue this. It's not so that this is not the end. I put that, what I'm putting up here, because that was my last slide that I have, in what is it? This is the last slide I have, kind of just given the context today in Nigeria, what new initiatives can we take to respond to our present context? And I want to quote an African proverb here. Don't think that this is, oh, there's nothing we can do. We can do a lot. There's an African proverb that says, if you think one is too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a room with one mosquito in it, and you will know. So if a single mosquito can make such a difference in your life, how much more a community of human beings, that know the context, we can make a whole lot of difference. So we need to not end it today. There should be an organization to take action. And before I go, since you have brought up Sister Choma, you brought up Joss, Sister Benny is still there. When you say, I don't know if she's still there. There, she's still there, And let me cite what a group of sisters did. As executive director of AFJN, when we had a meeting in Abuja on GMO, 62 sisters were invited. And then we sat down and discussed what can they do. It was at that meeting that the sisters said, trafficking is a horrible thing in Nigeria. Let's start in Edo State, where there are so many traffic victims there. Sister Choma, you know how many of our young ladies are here in Rome, So what happens is that the sisters we went from village to village, from Zaiki to Zaiki. Zaiki is the local name for the chief there, to the Minister of Youth and Special Duties, the Attorney General, Commissioner for Police, Governor Baseke, the Archbishop of Benin, one by one, visit after visit, over a period of 18 months. This is what happened. Number one, we got a community to shut down a brothel. So the chief of the community, who happens to be a lawyer by training, was so emboldened by the continuous visit of a group of sisters. And he enacted a law that ostracized the man. They shut down the brothel that they couldn't do before, ostracized the man and his family, number one. Number two, Governor Obaseke, because of those visits, first of all, established anti-trafficking task force and named one of the sisters into the task force, headed by the Attorney General, Professor Yinga Umarebe, who is the Attorney General of the state. Number two. Number three, we went back to him. He introduced a law to assembly and asked the sisters advocate for it. The law passed. And we sent a letter to the Oba of Benin. The Oba of Benin summoned all the medicine makers because they were involved in having the young lady make oaths so that they would be bound by the traffickers. Summoned all the medicine makers and put a curse on them that if they continue to do this, this is what is going to happen. Actually, after I finished, in the next 3 months, 3 of the medicine people died, and people say, oh, I don't know what killed them, but that put fear into it. What has happened is that 2 years ago, when I was in Benin, the Attorney General, Professor Yinka Umarebe, said to me, thanks to the activities of the AFJN, I have 20 traffickers in custody. Why am I saying this? Is that you don't need a truck full of people to affect change. You need a handful of committed people, sustained engagement, and going into the different stakeholders that have power to make change. I could go to Enugu State. I could name other places around Africa that a band of people, religious, have affected change. So I know this is not the forum of it. We are almost 30 minutes past the time that was allotted. But the point is that we can make change if we are committed to it, sustain, and bind to that. When spider webs unite, an Ethiopian proverb says, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. We can do it. You can do it, you know.
Okay, thank you so much,
Thank
Father and Eddie, for the beautiful talk. Quickly to respond to what Sister was asking, this program, we hope to continue it. It will be in series. This is the first of it, and we're so happy with the number that turned out, for it. The plan is that at least in a year that we'll meet at least 3 or 4 times. I have already started speaking with some other speakers that will then speak to us in the subsequent series. So, and we hope also to get Father Nedi to also go in detail and explain some of the things that he was not able to explain today. So, and the team is not just, it is not just Sister Esther and I, it involves all the members of the Dominican family that are assigned the task of justice and peace. So we have a WhatsApp group of which the different sisters that are in charge, the Dominican sisters that are in charge, are there. Then, having said that, I want to also say that we will be having a program in Enugu, on domestic violence in the homes. We are doing that in conjunction with the AFJN. We thank Sister Bene, who is here. Sister Bene is the sister to our brother, Father Anedi. Sister Bene is the Nigerian National Coordinator of AFJN. So we will collaborate with them to have a 4-day webinar, a 4-day workshop here in the Enugu, and we have already started reaching out to people to register for the program. So in that same vein, if there is any sister here, that is in Enugu that wishes to attend that program, she should please reach out to me and register. So apart from that, we'll also be having another workshop too at Emmanuel Catholic Parish, MN, on the 17th of December. They may speak to the youths on the domestic, on abuse of drug, on ritual killing, and I have already discussed with them, Father Ned, with regards to that. So we thank God that we have started, on a good note, and we hope to continue this good work. So our next program will then probably be in January. So you will see the flyer, about the program being circulated when it's close to the time. AFJN means African Faith Justice Network. African Faith Justice Network. Our brother Father Anedi has then worked with them. He was one that helped to bring this network down to Africa. And they have been very good friends. We have been working with them regards to issues of justice and peace, and they have been very helpful. So we thank our national coordinator, Sister Bene, for her input and how she has been, so good in helping us, to see that this our program works well. We thank you, sister.
Thank you very much for your hard work. It's Africa, Africa, faith and justice, not African.
Okay, Africa Faith Justice
Thank you for your dedication.
Thank you.
Africa.
All right. So this program
All is good to-
primarily should last.
Please, are we going to have the